Hello, Akuho'ai friends and student affairs friends, people who work with college students. I am honored and privileged today to moderate a panel of experts and people who are deeply invested in our university environments. They're aware that mental health issues are on the rise among college students, and in this COVID world, there are more of everything that's good sometimes and everything that's not so good. So I'm going to be asking them some questions that hopefully will share with you some information about how to support our students in need, how to remove barriers from mental health issues on campuses, boost communication, and promote overall wellness among our communities. So let me start by allowing them to introduce themselves. Our panel, esteemed panel, um, Dr. Mamta Asapati, would you start, please?
Good afternoon, everyone. It's good to be here. My name is Mamta Akapati, and I use she, her pronouns. And I have multiple roles. I'm right now operating as a 7th grade teacher from home. And my income comes from being the vice provost for university life at the University of Pennsylvania.
My name is Dr. Sonia Lohia Krishna. I am a private practice child, adolescent, and adult psychiatrist here in Austin, Texas. I trained at UCLA and I'm on affiliate faculty at Dell Medical School. And I'm also a board member of the Hi, How Are You project.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jason Pina, and I serve as the Chief Strategy Officer for Global Programs and University Life at New York University, and I'm happy to be with everyone today and those of you listening to a recording in the future.
And good afternoon, everyone. I am thrilled to take part in our presentation. My name is Jim Tweedy, and I use the pronouns he and his. And I am the Director of Residence Life and Housing at the University of Delaware. And I'm a lifetime res lifer, starting with my first RA job in 1986, and have made it, I guess, my life's work to really examine how the residence halls and the residence hall community can contribute to student success.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I am so grateful that all of you have said yes so willingly. So let's get started. Dr. Krishna, I'll start with you. How has mental health awareness changed in the past 5 years? Part one. And part two, what do you predict will happen in the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, thank you so much for having me. And I think this panel is exactly the reason that you can answer your question yourself. This type of panel never happened before. The fact that we are all able to connect during a pandemic and talk about mental health as a component of general wellness is a testament to how the conversation regarding brain biology has changed. So I think all of us can talk about how these things weren't really discussed when we were growing up, and there weren't as many assessments, and there definitely weren't as many services in school. I think that you can now see that as people are becoming more open and educated, starting with early curriculums on social emotional learning, and the fact that people are now creating their own brands and their own identities with social media and technology, there's just been a greater honesty and transparency, and people are using that to forge ahead and improve their mental health. I think this will only continue to grow over the next 5 to 10 years, and I think it's going to become much more normal, and hopefully the stigma will decrease. Thank you.
Thank you. Mamta, may I call you Mamta? What do you see as the biggest challenge that students are facing right now?
So, so interesting. My answer is I think the biggest challenge, and I don't think it's just for our students. I think our students are a microcosm of our society in general. And it may not be the answer that you think that I'm going to offer, and that is widespread pandemic loneliness. So I think our pandemic only revealed the underlying pandemic, which I think I think we're trying to talk about, but really haven't centered, which is widespread loneliness. I'm going to pull from a book that I read. It actually came out right as we were kind of transitioning to working from home during the pandemic. And my favorite Surgeon General, Dr. Vivek Murthy, in his book, Together, he talks about kind of the systemic loneliness, and he identifies it in 3 different categories, right? So intimate loneliness, so that intimate partner sense of authentic connection with an intimate partner, whatever that looks like, relational or social loneliness, which is those high quality, not lot, but a high quality individual relationships that we might have that sustain us, and then a collective loneliness, that network or community. So not maybe people in your sphere here or there, but like that broad level sense of connection. And so when you think about what a systemic, these three-pronged component of loneliness, I think our biggest challenge is in a world that we continue to talk about that is completely connected. We're missing the quality of the interactions and experiences that I think we have this opportunity, this invitation to recenter. And I think that this should probably be our greatest priority across the board within higher education, so that our students can cultivate these habits that then they take into their world of work, graduate school life, and beyond, to then kind of sustain a healthy society and democracy.
That is lovely. And again, that book was?
The book's name is Together. Why social connection is the key to better health, higher performance, and greater happiness.
Oh,
I can put it in the chat function.
Oh, thank you so much. Others, biggest challenges that you're seeing from your perspective? Anyone like to add to that? Jump ball.
I can add one more piece. The other piece that I would say, and the reason I started with loneliness is that's a bedrock, right? But that becomes the amplifier to all of the other social issues that are converging into this moment, right? So we, have a colleague that reminds me that we talk about COVID 2019, and he references the pandemic of 1619, which is the historic enslavement of Black people in our country, and kind of looking at that 400-year history, that or 401-year history, to think about now, what does it mean? So we have now senses of disconnection. We have people that are claiming and asking for their humanity to be seen and held sacred, as all of our humanities should be held sacred. People are more claiming their wholeness, as we talk about high stakes issues around gender equity and addressing sexual assault. So these social justice components only become more revealed and more elevated because of this underlying loneliness dimension. And so we have this invitation for authentic senses of connection, which include the recognition of these intersections of identities as well.
Excellent.
And from a residence hall perspective, I appreciate Dr. Akapati's perspective on loneliness, because it's a piece where, I feel like we put so much energy, all of our scales. I mean, every assessment we ever do, we benchmark against a scale on sense of belonging to get a sense about where our students are at. And we feel like that's our primary charge, is to be able to help students achieve that. And, to certainly look at all of the students' experience, all the various identities, and to be able to find a way for all students to feel like they're making contributions here, they matter here, what they do here is important. And, to me that, it goes along with the idea of combating loneliness and student isolation and things like that as a root cause and a root issue. And, when I look at this idea of a residential community or a campus community, I believe it's one of our primary duties to be working on that.
Thank you. And Jim, I'm going to ask you to continue with, what are the most critical challenges that you see that we really have to face in order to face the future effectively?
I'm going to talk about this from a residence hall perspective. I realize I'm coming at this from a different piece, but it's a cool. So I want to discuss from a framework that one of the biggest challenges that I see is the idea that we can't counseling center our way through this arena. And, I have to look at this as we're all part of the student support. We are all addressing mental health issues. We are all trying to work to develop a type of an ecosystem to where we have a certain plateau of skills, we have certain parts and certain roles to play, and that we have to move away and continue to move away from the idea that, we engage with a student in need, we refer them to the counseling center, we walk them over and things like that. We're never going to be able to hire enough in order to make that approach work. And I also don't think it's a fair way to go. There's many other ways and many other actors on the university campus who can play a role with college student mental health, who may not currently see themselves having the capacity, the influence, and the power to do so. That I think part of our job is to kind of empower our full campus ecosystem and infrastructure, that everybody has an understanding and a sense that they do have a role here, not only from a sense of obligation, but they also have the skills to be able to, within their scope, to be able to help our students with the challenges that they're facing. So when I look at our continuously rising numbers, the continuously complexity of some of the situations we face, I feel like this is not something that the psychologists, therapists, and the center directors can do on their own, that this is something that we, each and every one of us, have something that we must do, and that we each have a piece that we can play. And so when I look at the larger challenges, that's something that really feels true to me.
Excellent. Thank you. Jason, some promising practices that you're seeing on your campus or at other universities nationally. Now, you just moved to NYU, so you have two very different types of schools that you've both been recently at, and a lot of colleagues to who you probably shared information with. So any promising practices out there?
Absolutely, and I think that the one good aspect of this is that there's a commonality that I'm seeing, whether it's the convergence of this well-being concept in our national organizations like NERSA, NASPA, ACPA, ACUI, and others. You're starting to see an understanding that goes beyond maybe some traditional structures and traditional work that people have experienced during their professional upbringing or their own experience as students on campuses across the country and across the world. I like to point out really three that I've seen at my last couple of institutions that I think folks should look deeply to see if they exist at their content in their campuses, and also work to try to make sure arise as a promising practice on their campus. Number one is that I'm beginning to have institutional research professionals reaching out to student affairs to try to understand how to integrate well-being, student engagement type questions beyond the traditional student affairs, student services type surveys that we have traditionally done. So beyond the SERPs and other type of engagement opportunities with our students, they are now asking, because they're thinking more holistically about the work they're doing within our colleges and departments, as well as what our regional accrediting bodies are asking them to produce in terms of data. So, I think paying attention to regional accreditation, how they are evolving and what they're asking people to produce, and knowing that we're well positioned to be able to offer some insights and resources to those colleagues, as well as to really look at that data as it's collected to see what's actionable for our representative campuses. The other piece is, and we try to work at this at Ohio University, and I know we borrowed this and looked at it from other places like Wake Forest, that looking at well-being as not a standalone concept or pillar of a plan, but integrated across the plan. So whatever strategic plans that a university life division, a student affairs division is examining for their own employees and students, is what needs to be common and cut across no matter what work we do. Whether it's inclusivity, diversity, and equity type notions, as well as well-being. I think that's starting to grow more and more and being respected as something that is foundational to whatever we're doing as a division from a strategic planning standpoint. The last piece is there is obviously a great recognition to what many of us, if not all of us, have been going through the last 9 months, personally and professionally, through this pandemic. And I've really been heartened by the respect for burnout and mental health support of our employees. And I do feel pretty vindicated as a student affairs professional that we've cared about our colleagues for our entire professional lives, and we've trained to be supportive in this respect. But seeing other VPs at the academy talk about their employees, having the president and board talk about how are we supporting folks during this time, whether it's from being a 7th grade teacher at home, or just the caregiving and an impact on people in their lives and how they're doing work differently. I don't want us to lose this opportunity. I think we're scrambling around to be supportive of that. And what we need to do is be conscious of how do we institutionalize this care of our employees beyond the pandemic, because I do believe we'll be beyond the pandemic one day, but I do not want to revert to thinking of employees as widgets or disposable, or they're out on their own, that these personal pressures people feel, they're navigating their lives regardless of what health crisis is afflicting our communities. And I think we're really well positioned to help add to that, but it needs to be institutionalized, what we're seeing people try to do right now.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Thank you, Jason. Anyone else with promising practices that you'd want to share? Okay. Let's go on to Mamta. What is the number one way that you believe that we can make a substantial difference?
So my caveat, you're going to hear a violin in the background.
I
Because my
love that
lessons are happening
violin.
right now. The number one way we can make a difference, well, first is it's the flexibility and forgiveness, right? So I'll start with that and laughter around that. But truly, to me, and it's interesting, right? We're talking about this in a post-COVID mindset. And I really need to be honest with you, Terry, if you had asked me this question in 2014, when I was transitioning to my prior institution, Rollins College, the answer would have been the same. Which is, where are we maximizing the I love you moments on campus? That is the core, that is the number one way we can make a difference. I think, I grew up in our profession, a superstar at planning the perfect programs. I had the perfect publicity for those programs. I had the best door tags. I mean, and I'm very proud of that training and that experience. And our world needs something different right now. So when I think about a student looking back on their good old days, which is college, right? They're not going to be like, wow, that workshop on strengths was just transformative to my life. They're going to say, wow, that conversation that I had with Dr. Pina really changed my life, right? And so where are we maximizing those I love you moments in our communities? Right now, I think we're living in this time in a world that is struggling between love and fear, right? And so if we center that value of we're struggling at a time where people are negotiating between love and fear, and there isn't much difference in how you intervene between those moments, but feeding the love then yields a far more transformative experience. We have this amazing opportunity to heal our community. The third piece that I would say is, and again, this is Dr. Vivek Murthy's phrase. He calls it social revival. We're in a time, an invitation for social revival, where we can recommit to people and relationships, right? During this pandemic, we've seen neighbors checking on people offering to buy groceries for people who are vulnerable, right? So we're seeing, again, this resurgence of interconnectedness and humanity that we should, I hope we never lose these components, the precipitates of this experience. And so we have this catalytic moment for unity, and just the reminder that we need each other. I want to think about, like, I have this awesome, one of our house deans at Penn, her name is Catherine, and we have college houses. So in the Roden house, she has this thing of plant clippings. So we have students living on campus, and she shares her plant clippings with students. And so guess what's happening is that she's sharing her plant clippings, teaching students how to, expand their plant. And then the student takes the clipping, maybe comes back and says, gosh, the basil isn't doing as well. Like, how can I fix whatever? Now, think about how restorative that is, right? Think about how personal it is. Think about the interactions. That's a very different type of programmatic engagement, if I could call that. So maximizing those moments for human connection, I think, are the ways that we could really focus. And I would say those are probably the most significant ways we can make a difference.
That is beautiful. Whoever thought that they would be buying toilet paper for their neighbors? And that's what has been created. Neighbors that I didn't know their name until this. Yeah. Thank you. Now I'm going to ask this question to all of you. And Jim, if you would start, that would be great. Is there something you've done or something that you wish everyone was doing to check in on others? and why?
Sure. I appreciate the question. And again, I'll take this purely from a residence hall perspective. I think most of my work for the last 10, 20 years or so has been on this idea of kind of designing a curriculum for the residence halls. But part of that also includes not leaving so many things to chance in terms of our inputs in the environment. But we want to make sure that every one of our students have been offered a minimum of 4 formal opportunity to sit down one-on-one with our RAs. And, we have a lot of capacity to, kind of help manage what happens in that conversation. And really, I would say over the last several years, as we focus more on well-being, many of those conversations have to do with just a genuine, authentic conversation of asking that student how they are, getting a status check, being able to really get a feel about how they're just personally doing, beyond some of the more generic style of questions. And that's also meant that, we've done a lot of work with our staff in terms of, the just foundational aspects of motivational interviewing and being able to engage, quite quickly into deeper conversations. And I think another thing that we're doing, again, purely residence hall, has moved all of those like typical floor meeting kind of things into a restorative circle model. So listening circles, making sure that, we use those talking pieces, want to be able to get at everybody's perspective, and that we're introducing topics into those group conversations and those community conversations that get more at how people are doing, how they're navigating, what they're facing, how they can gain community support from one another, how they can gain support from, folks in my arena, and things like that. Another piece that I've been excited about that we're still doing quite a bit of work on is that we are trying to take that ecosystem approach a little bit, or at least to try to figure out what we can do in our residence halls. And that is to work on offering, since we don't offer counseling per se, but skill-based approaches. So we have teamed with our counseling center, and they've provided the expert consultation to develop a whole skill-based series in terms of things that we can then have in the residence halls for things like, how to recognize and regulate emotions, how to manage stress and anxiety. I mean, specific techniques and tools for students to do that, how to help them more effectively manage expectations, mindset and grit, things like that. But those are things that my staff are quite capable, with their backgrounds to be able to conduct group kind of training and skill-based models on. But, it's an area where we're also then being able to, kind of help students understand that we're very invested in this arena, and that we are opening up as many opportunities for dialogue and things like that. And I think also in terms of the areas that we're working on, and perhaps too slowly, but I also don't want to miss this moment and taking the work of Dr. Kendi in terms of the anti-racism and being able to kind of look at that framework within our residence halls and examine all of our areas from the perspective of an anti-racist philosophy, and to really look at our inclusion and to really look at our kind of capacity for all of our students from there too. But in concert with this, because I do believe that there's relationships on all these arenas, and that when I look at a limited set of resources I have to reach my students, I want to be very conscious about what we're trying to accomplish there. But the more holistic student well-being is certainly a very big part of that, and I need to make sure that we're providing our staff members with the techniques and the capacity to do that.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Jim. Jason?
Yeah, I think my reflections on your question really went to staff and my work colleagues versus students. And I had to think back a few months when I actually had a staff to work with. And, number one and overarching is making sure that you create and hold space for individuals and groups, as well as ask for help. I really thought about the investment I made as a colleague in the lives of the people around me was going to pay dividends as we move forward with the changing landscape of working through a pandemic. So let me offer up 3 pieces that I did. Number one was I spent a lot of time addressing my own mental health. And I let those folks that work directly for me know. My staff prior to March has seen me cry and break down on a number of occasions, and I continue to do so and let them know how hard this was on me as a person and as a professional to feel a sense of responsibility and, in the context in which we were all living. Second was really with our leadership team sitting down with our counseling center and saying, we want to do something for our staff, all 400 of them, but we want it to actually be effective, and helping us think through with experts, how do we structure something that would be meaningful and authentic to their lives versus being simply a box check or saying that we did it. So we worked really hard to try to figure out what that would look like, and did it on, we ended up doing it initially every 2 weeks, then we went once a month. And the foundational thread of those gatherings really helped folks feel connected to our community, even when we made really difficult decisions. About 2 months into the pandemic, we abolished almost 120 positions. And even people on those calls, while their jobs were being eliminated, they felt respected. They weren't happy, but because we invested the time with the experts and how do we communicate and let them know, it was really helpful. And the third piece is that I chose to quietly reach out to individuals in the division to make contact with them that would be meaningful for them. So sometimes that was a card, a text, a phone call. Some people needed to have that meeting. Recommendation letters for those people who we did abolish their jobs, as well as dropping off gifts. So really meeting people where they were and making it my solemn commitment to do the best I could to either bring joy or light or support to the lives of individuals without feeling like I had to get any kind of credit. As a matter of fact, beyond my partner, this is the first time I ever told people that I did this with all of my staff the best I could. So I just think that being authentic during this situation was the most important thing I could do for the staff to help them out and check in on them.
And you're modeling that behavior. That's outstanding. Thank you. Dr. Krishna?
Thank you. So I think that for myself, what I really did is stop juggling 100 balls at the same time and focus on a few. And I really noticed unconsciously and consciously, I was doubling down on the relationships that were more meaningful versus the loose affiliations I have to thousands of people. I'm sure all of you, tens of thousands of people over the course of life that normally would have faded in and out just based on people moving. But now with technology, we are really able to keep in touch with everyone. So I know things happening to people that I normally would not have had to take up the brain space before. And while I still want to be connected to them during the pandemic, I really focused more on the people who were in my community. And I think community is what we all believe in. Otherwise, we wouldn't have chosen these types of careers, and really focusing on the people. We build communities by spending time together, and we promote flexibility and resilience to deal with life's challenges. There's lots of data, and I've done work internationally, when after natural disasters, you see people actually thrive. They don't have the rates of PTSD in the same way as an individual who has gone through a trauma. Because if everyone in the community is going through it, it's not a mental illness per se. It's something everyone went through and everyone works together to get through. So that's very different than individual trauma. So to Dr. Tweedy's point, the staff should be equipped to handle this, because if everyone is having anxiety and mood changes with the pandemic, I don't consider that a mental illness. So yes, people are calling me more and they think they all of a sudden meet criteria for psychiatric illness and need medication. And I really quickly just talk to them as a friend and have the hi, how are you conversation and direct them to community support. Obviously, if they're more ill or something got triggered, then I can recommend higher levels of care, as all of you would as well. But the majority of people just need that community support. They were lonely before, as Dr. Akapati said, and they're even lonelier now. And I have felt that myself. So we're joking, I have my Peloton bike in the back for group community for fitness. Otherwise, I really don't want to do it, but it forces me to be a part of something. I am definitely also buying gifts for my neighbors that I normally wouldn't have. I'm spending a lot more time with family, and we've built a quarantine of a few families that we can hang out with who are practicing safe social distancing and mask wearing the way that we believe, so that we can align ourselves and then promote just sharing positive experiences. To people I know less commonly, or what I recommend to the general population, is asking, hi, how are you? So the point of that is like the I love you moment. It's just asking someone. It's just being there with them. It's honoring them and bearing witness to their life experiences. And this is a life experience that we all get to go through together. So those are things we should be doing anytime to anyone, because you never know what someone's going through until you ask them. But this is such a communal event that we're going through. everyone has a similar response to it, and we can help just support each other through it. So just asking, you don't have to have the answer, you're just opening the door to the conversation. And then depending on what comes up, you can decide if you feel comfortable handling it or if you need to enlist some other officials at the university or in the community.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Mamta?
Oh my gosh, I'm in the position to follow all these amazing colleagues. So I never, and I'm only able to say this 8 months into this pandemic experience, but in the energy space that I sit in now, never have I ever been more affirmed of the work that I do in my profession in any other time in my life and in my career. So for all of those folks who judged pizza and balloon moments and bouncy house moments and all of those things, hello, right? Like this is the question that's happening is for those of us that have already opened our campuses broadly to most students, or in our case, at Penn, as we're thinking about now bringing the bulk of our students back residentially, what's the conversation? How are we creating these experiences and interactions for our students, right? So never have I ever felt more affirmed to be in this field. And this is for, I know you asked the question around, what, in what ways, what could we doing or what, as we're checking in with each other. I just want this to be an invocation that newsflash, efficient does not mean effective. So Dr. Tweedy, I think you said this in the beginning of our conversation. You said, we're not going to counseling center our appointment out of this, right? This is not what this is about. And Dr. Krishna echoed that same perspective that what we're talking about is, as human beings, we are infinite spirits. So we're not going to have one appointment for this, one appointment for that out of this. We are stewarding humans with infinite spirits to lifelong processes and supporting and cultivating the courage for people to go on the lifelong journey of self-revelation that we're all meant to be on. This is exactly what higher education is supposed to be. This is exactly why we are positioned the way that we are. And so I wish, I'm going to invoke a party moment. My favorite moments when I was in college was not the party. It was sitting at Denny's after the party. Right. So what are the after party moments? It was also getting ready with my friends before the party. I remember listening to EDM music and getting ready for and all the laughter with my girlfriends before that. Those are the things that I remember. So we have this, I wish we would think about the before space and the after space in the work and relationships that we do with one another. I see a lot more integration. I love if I could brag on my Rollins colleagues for a moment. Dr. Krishna, your model that you just referenced and kind of, this is a friend moment, not a therapy-based moment. The director of our wellness center, Connie Briscoe there, they developed kind of this, as students are being referred to the wellness center, first doing that early triage, like, oh, but yeah, it sounds like you need to talk to your hall director and they can talk you through how you build connections with one another, or you want to, you want to get involved in the community, like let's connect you. And so they're doing that before, and assessing what requires that purposeful therapy. So I think we all have the ability to do that. We are all chief wellness officers in our lives, just as we should all be chief diversity officers, and we should all be chief finance officers. If we're talking about wellness in this reaction-based model that is only student health, meaning I'm treating an illness, or mental health, I'm treating, again, that's the responding to something, not the creation of something. Right now, we're just in a time, out of chaos comes the most glorious creation. That is true spiritually. And I think that that's true right now. So I just, if we could just ride this wave and really embrace the creation moments, I think there's just a lot of beauty ahead of us.
Oh, there's so much beauty in all of your answers too, that of what we can be doing and what we're doing. I appreciate you sharing what you're doing for yourselves. I'm going to share my screen again and allow you to see. Share. Ta-da. I think I'm going to. The Hi, How Are You mural that is in Austin, Texas. Mamta, could you share your story about this?
Yes. So this is, Terry, you know how much this initiative and movement is just so precious to me, and I'm so grateful for your vision around this. And so this mural means everything to me because when my life was falling apart, as at this point I was a sophomore at the University of Texas. From my 18th floor window ledge, I lived in Dobie Center Residence Hall at the University of Texas. I talked to the hi, how are you, Jeremiah the Frog. I talked to him almost daily because by this point, I had stopped going to class. By this point, no one knew that my life was falling apart. My RA at this point did not know. My roommate didn't tell anybody. There was no academic intervention. So this fall semester, my sophomore year of college, I was failing all of my classes. And I would mentally talk to the hi, how are you frog and tell my woes as I'm sitting on my window ledge looking out. And I would, and so when you and your team launched this initiative, I was like, this was literally this was the intervention moment that I needed because meaningful partners like housing and mental health and academic affairs were doing excellent work, but in isolation because MUMPTA fell through the cracks. And people were doing excellent work, but they weren't integrating excellent work together. So I would much rather, so my invitation around this and what this reminds me is that I would rather do deeply imperfect work in all of my functional areas, but do it connected with my colleagues than do perfect work within separate functional areas with that work not being connected and students falling through the cracks. And so this is just what this reminds me of, and that really one personal connection is all you need. And it was one personal connection. So there was an RA who did reach out to me and he said, come apply, be an orientation advisor. It was one hi, how are you and how are you doing really moment that then transformed not only my personal experience, but my life and career that allows me to sit and talk with you today.
That's so beautiful. And you give me far too much credit. We actually at American Campus purchased this building with the mural. That is the beginning of this for us. And our team, our CEO, and Bill Bayless sits on the board. And Gina Coward, our Senior Vice President for Communication, also is incredibly active and participates on the board. But we are in our beginning year of this, and it's been an amazing partnership with the Hi, How Are You Foundation. Now, Dr. Krishna is going to speak now to her involvement, and it is much deeper than mine. And I think for me, it's just sharing it and getting it out there because it is, as was mentioned previously, love moments and hi, how are you moments that make the difference. Dr. Krishna?
Yes, so I have worked in university settings as well, and I actually was an RA and an orientation leader back in college too, so I could have gone down your path. I worked at Dell Medical School and Dell Children's here in Austin for 5 years in a big bureaucratic system, and a year ago I started a private practice. And so as I was doing that, I realized I knew I would miss the big system change of working coordinated and in collaboration with everyone, but I needed more flexibility. And so what I did instead is I met Tom Gimble and Courtney Blanton in the photos, who started this project just a couple years ago in memory of Daniel Johnston. So he drew the mural. He's a musician that Tom represented, and he struggled with a lot of mental illness and passed away, unfortunately. So to his memory and legacy and Courtney's issues with mental health that she has been so open and sharing, they created just this easy question, hi, how are you, based on this mural, and worked with American campus communities and different officials to be able to allow college students to just have the conversation and create that community, not stigmatizing anything and not really even treating, but just opening the door for the conversation, which in itself can be treatment for the majority of people. What has been amazing is that the survey was done in September and 12,000 people responded. You guys don't even have everyone all living together. And in this inaugural survey, 12,000 people responded, and you can see the results. It's really clear. Kids, teens, young adults of this generation, they're very aware of mental health. They understand the pandemic has made them pay attention to it more, and they're willing to talk to people about it. So I think we should capitalize on that and teach them to be vulnerable and say, hi, how are you? And then be able to have the resources on how to handle what comes next.
Thank you. What I'd like to do is ask our panelists to follow up on that a little bit and share their final thoughts, their hopes, any messages for people who are going to be listening to this as possibly an in-service in student affairs and student housing. Any final thoughts on destigmatizing and offering opportunities for students?
The one thing that I would say is we all are far more powerful than we think. In any position we have or hold, we have far more power than we think. And this is the time to really leverage that power and radiate the energy that only each and every one of us can bring as individuals. No one has the magic that Dr. Krishna has on this panel. No one has your magic, Terry. No one has Dr. Peter, Dr. Tweeds. We all bring different magic to the table. We need everyone's magic at the table. So, so I say that to our colleagues out there. That's just critical. And so one of the things that I would say, and this is cheesy, and you can laugh at me, that's fine. We have the ability to leverage orchestrated, intentional, purposeful collisions. And there is no place where that happens more frequently than in our residential environments. So again, a group of colleagues, at Rollins, they combined voter registration with walking door to door, right? So treating it neighborhood style. So walking door to door, you're talking to people, you're having a hi, how are you moment, but you're also talking about voter registration as well, right? So these are these orchestrated, intentional, purposeful collisions that we all have, and that's different from planning a program. So just claim your magic because the world needs it right now.
Oh, thank you.
Terry, I think I like to offer to folks listening today and in the future is, there is still a lot of second guessing of our colleagues. We have gotten some evidence that our faculty with online classes have had on some level a crisis of confidence in their ability to deliver. We're seeing our students questioning the value of some of these engagements academically online and wanting to be in person for classes for a lot of obvious reasons. And I don't know if we hold a key, but we do hold a lot of insight and a lot of tips that are evidence-based that we should really work hard the next 2 months to try to get those tips and insights to our faculty through whatever processes exist on your campus so they can be integrated into spring semester classes. And for us to really be supportive of what our faculty are trying to pull together for our students in remote learning, because hopefully next academic year, we may be in a different space in terms of how we're delivering on our core academic missions. And we'll be able to circle back and build upon us helping our partners across campus out to do more than just salvage a year, but help our faculty thrive in delivering their passions to students and help our students have a bit better, if not substantially better, experience next semester than maybe they've had since March.
Yes, I like all of that, especially the thriving. Yes. Jim or Dr. Krishna, your final thoughts?
I'll jump in. There's a quote, I don't know, I attribute it to George Q. It may not be his original, but serendipity is too important to leave to chance. And I've always generally believed that for our residence hall environment. But now when we are asking everybody to stay apart, stay away, stay isolated, be safe, we, in my mind, have to do a much stronger job of reaching out, let people know that we're here, let people know how to get with us, let people know that we care, let people know that we can help, and that there are people here to do that. And I would say in general, we probably have always needed to increase our efforts. Right now, we need to redouble or triple them and to really move forward in a much more concentrated manner to try to get those contacts made and those points of connection made that often we've left to just the random nature of people living in the same area.
Thank you.
And I will just add that I appreciate everyone taking the time to do this. I fully believe in mental health. This is my life's work, and I can think of no greater purpose than connecting to people and helping people with some of the greatest struggles that most of the time they internalize and have been stigmatized for so long. And to hear all of you talk about the university focus on this is really just enlightening and heartening. I don't think that this existed when I went to college. I definitely felt isolated, living in a big building with lots of people, but lonely at the same time. And so I think that the fact that everyone is focusing on it will just decrease the rates of general mental health problems, because the baseline thresholds will be different now. And if you're not having everyone's mild problem escalate, you can really treat the people who have the more extreme biologic organic versions, but not the general population, which is what it's turning into now, unless we create the right community to support everyone. So I really appreciate everyone putting their efforts in, because this is hard work for sure, and it's definitely draining. And hearing about all these problems can lead to additional burnout. But if everyone supports each other through it and uses their magic, then we can all lift each other as we struggle together, and we will raise all the ships together.
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you. I would invite anyone who's listening now or in the recording to go to americancampus.com, the media page, for two great surveys. One on Hi, how are you? And the student mental health, and then just a general student report during COVID. In that last report, one of the questions, what are students missing the most? This is what they found. Socializing with friends, no surprise. I love the in-class instruction is something that they're missing. It just speaks to the value that Dr. Pena spoke to, the faculty, all of the value all around. So I would challenge all those listening to share, because you have the expertise, you have the experiences, you have promising practices to share with all of us, your suggestions for helping students who are missing this engagement. I am so grateful for my friends and heroes on this panel. Your invitation and suggestions that our colleagues need to thrive, be serendipitous, come together and share the magic. I wish all of that for all of you in this holiday season and in the coming 2021. So thank you very much.